Hola, hola mi gente, welcome back to my channel. I am XO Joe and today we're going to go into Jennette McCurdy's I'm Glad My Mom Died. Before we get started, if you're not yet subscribed, please subscribe, like, and comment. I apologize that I'm not pouring a drink live today. I just started sipping on this so fast. I needed that boost of energy before diving into this book because there's just a lot to say here. So make sure you have your favorite drink or snack as you watch and let's dive into this. Now, I don't normally read celebrity memoirs. They've definitely become more and more of a thing. I was never really interested because, to tell you the truth, sometimes I wonder if celebrities actually write their own memoir. It might be naive of me or maybe mean of me to say, but I really do wonder if they actually tell their story. However, Jennette McCurdy has been off TV, just off the radar, and I kept reading that she sincerely wrote this herself and that she was an exceptional writer, so it really caught my attention. I was also really surprised to hear that some people even found it funny, even though her story is very tragic, very vulnerable. Some trigger warnings. This book does talk about abuse. It does go into graphic details with her experience with some men about eating disorders. So if that's something difficult for you or you just don't want to read it, she literally maps out her entire journey with her eating disorder. It's a very heavy book. When I was young, I was an iCarly viewer as well. I didn't really think much about any of the actors really in their life outside of set because I sort of assumed it was bad. I mean, I grew up watching Lindsay Lohan, the Olsen twins. I also grew up loving Hannah Montana, so Miley Cyrus, Selena Gomez of Wizards of Waverly Place. And basically all of these child stars had a really tragic story. So I kind of assumed it came with the territory. So when Jennette McCurdy finally came out to talk more about her time on Nickelodeon, I just felt so hard for her because I've heard people share their stories and I think it's so difficult and it's so admirable to write all your experiences and publish it and let the world just read it. I just really wanted to hear Jennette's family story. I wanted to hear her healing. It just sincerely sounded authentic and I am definitely interested in people sharing their story. I was able to get an actual copy of the book. In the audiobook, she actually narrates the book herself. So you really get 100% Jennette in her writing via audiobook. She really tells you the story the way she wants to tell you. Everyone likes to talk about how she titled this, I'm Glad My Mom Died. And I felt like so many people were just gasping at the audacity and the shock factor or whatever. Hearing that type of statement didn't really shock me. It wasn't so surprising to me. If you had a good relationship with your parent, you may not understand that sometimes the only way to escape or leave is when someone's finally gone. Doesn't mean that the person isn't still sad about it, but at the same time, that parent or that guardian was their abuser. So it's a very conflicting feeling to, on one hand, feel relief because you're finally free from this abuse, and on the other hand, it's still your parent. There's tension there. I think that's what makes this book really beautiful, and she's obviously speaking to people who don't get it and representing people who do get it. I did do some research after reading this and I'll talk about that throughout the video because I was really interested to hear what Jennette had to say outside of her book. So interviews, press, all of that. And something she does talk about with her title, she said that she created this title to pull people in, that you see this on the shelf, you're like, what? You know, she said a lot of people love their mom, so they probably don't understand what this title means. And for the record, I also love my mom and I have a good relationship with my mom, but that doesn't mean that everyone has a good relationship with their mom, and it doesn't mean that you're wrong for not having a good relationship with your mom. She did confirm that this title was meant to make people think and, you know, shock people, and that if you read this book by the end of it, you should understand why she titled it this way, and I will get into that. Now, on the front of this cover, there's a few people that commented, you know, that left their little review, and the one that really stood out to me is that it said impressively funny. People said that she kind of made you laugh one second and cry the next, and she was able to tell this really dark and heavy story in a lighthearted way. And I think that takes some skill, so I really wanted to read this, and I really wondered how Jennette wanted to share her story. I'm gonna go into the book a little bit before I tell you the one thing I really didn't like. I felt deceived a little bit. I'd be a little bit controversial, but I am here to share my point of view and, you know, how I experienced this book. So in this book, we definitely go from when she was very little all the way to or right before the iCarly reboot. If you don't know, iCarly did reboot, I think this year or 2021, and Jennette McCurdy was not a part of that reboot. The book is told in present tense, so she'll say, I'm walking here with mom, I'm going to the hospital with mom. Like, I thought she was kind of gonna go back and sort of reflect, and instead she makes you live through it with her by being in first person and really being in her mind in those ages that she's at. Something that I really admired in her book was actually the way she illustrated hypervigilance really well. If you don't have hypervigilance, I think this book really gives you a sense of what it's like, and it sounds kind of nuts. There's a chapter in here where young Jennette talks about liking going to church because things are just quiet and feel perfect, and she's connected in her faith. She can't get out of this hellhole and spend more time at church if everyone else kind of disrupts her mother's mood. She starts this balancing act where she's trying to make sure her older brothers are prepared by the time her mom comes out. She tries to make sure that nothing gets spilled because then her mom will step on it and her stockings will get wet and they'll have to stop by Rite Aid to buy another pair, and that cuts into her peaceful time, the only time she has in the week. Kid, that's crazy that you already know that you have a sanctuary somewhere outside of your home and that you know what every single member needs for this to happen. You feel Jennette's anxiety. You feel how she's at the edge anticipating what needs to happen every single frame of this morning to make sure they get out of the door on time and get to church on time so she can have a safe space again. I felt tense reading this chapter. Like, my shoulders went up and I was just maintaining, like, oh my gosh, you just want this kid to be taken care of instead of her taking care of everyone else. And I'm gonna read a little excerpt from this. Through an act of God, we may just make it to church on time. I'm elated. I lift the wet Christmas towel from the milk spot. I head to the kitchen to re-wet it for round 2 when mom crosses through and heads for the living room. Anxiety fills my body. I'm just about to warn mom, but by the time she's out of the kitchen, I know it's too late. What is this? Mom asks in a tone that makes me know she knows exactly what it is she just stepped in. I tell mom I already started to clean it up, so the wetness is mostly just water, but it doesn't matter. Her mood has already switched. She's already ripping off her tights and calling for dad, saying we're gonna need a stop at Rite Aid so she can get a new pair. I wonder if there's something different I could have done to get us out the door faster. I wonder if there's something I can do in the future. Throughout this whole chapter, she's juggling all of the members of the family, trying to figure out what to do. And at the end of it, it's no point, you know, because I mean, she's 8. For me, that line where she says, I wonder if there's something different I could have done. I wonder if there's something I can do in the future. Like it's her fault, like it's on her. You see this throughout the whole book because Jennette really gives you a first person view, like a seat right in her mind. And that's also another part of her book I admire, because a lot of her thoughts, especially as she becomes a young woman, a young adult, you can see that it's unhealthy. You can see that she's hurting other people around her as well. But she's honest about it. She's transparent that she was okay using her boyfriend. She wanted to use her friends the way that she did. And really throughout the whole book, you can tell that it was almost like healing for Jennette to write this book. And in some interviews, she does mention that it was a book written for her. And I remember when I went to one of my favorite authors writing seminar, Maggie Stiefvater, people asked her, you know, why do authors write? And she said that a lot of authors have different reasons for sharing their story, that some people really want to be famous. Some people think it's healing. Other people want to move people and they want to connect with the reader and change someone's life. And I feel like when you read this book, you can tell that that is a story for mainly her, and that's all that matters. Now, if you're curious, the book does talk about Miranda Cosgrove, who is Carly in iCarly and their friendship. That was the only thing I kind of braced myself like, oh no, was it not real? Like that would suck if you were together for so long and on a show for so long and maybe you weren't really friends. And the way Jennette talks about Miranda is so sweet. From Jennette being this insecure teen, not sure if she could have a genuine friend, to being a grown-up and still having this connection with Miranda, but setting newfound boundaries. It was really lovely to read. So overall, yes, Jennette talks about her time at Nickelodeon and her time as a child star, but really it focuses on her mom and how her mom forced her to live this dream that she never wanted. She makes it very clear that her mom always wanted to be famous, look nice, be with the big people and all of that stuff. Jennette hated it every single moment. She absolutely despised it. She didn't want to do it, but she still forced herself to say yes to her mom. It was for everything. I mean, it went from really big things like her career and moving on her own, which never really happened, to even choosing her ice cream flavor. I mean, it really shows you how deep the abuse and the control was. And of course, her mom also controlled and enabled her awful eating habits and the way she dressed, and it really affected the way she perceived herself as a woman as she, you know, started to develop and everything in her relationship with men. Jennette's mom did launch off her anorexia, and Jennette is very open about her journey with her eating disorder, from being anorexic to being bulimic, to her recovery, to her ongoing relationship with her food. If you look at some of her interviews now, she still talks about it because she has OCD and she struggled with eating, so there's a lot that she's still working on and continues to. And again, I think it's that transparency that really helps us understand all the different layers of abuse she endured from her mom. There were even some lines in here where Jennette talks to her mom like, I love her, she loves me, we are one, she's my one, you know, and it's like, whoa, very codependent, not even codependent. I don't think I even have the words for that sense of I move, you move, I move. Like they're seriously one person. Her mom had cancer and then later relapsed until, you know, eventually she passed away. Jennette really struggles with, how do I make my own decisions now that my parent, the one who controlled me, the one who was my guidepost, the one who laid out my map, is gone. I just can't imagine how it feels to suddenly lose basically who you are, because her mom was who she was. She constantly made decisions thinking like, what would mom think, what would mom like? And that continued after her mom passed away, but it was a lot harder because without her mom being directly right there, Jennette started to lose any reasons for continuing to act. She also does touch on her relationship with Ariana Grande because she was her co-star in Sam and Cat. Jennette is very open that she never wanted Ariana's career, but that she did feel bitter that she was treated unfairly compared to Ariana. The producers let Ariana skip filming days. They created an entire weird episode around Ariana's absence, and Jennette was the one holding everything down, and it wasn't work she was proud of. She was not proud to be on Nickelodeon. She didn't want to keep doing it, but she was still in this contract, and yet Ariana was allowed to just go free. I feel like you can see that since her mom had passed and everything, she starts to feel that everything was just so unfair. And instead of realizing that that came from her mom and the way she was treated, being mistreated by her producers and agents and how that felt unfair, I think really triggered her. Over the course of her young adult life, she does discover way more about her family and her mom that she never knew. Her whole life is turned upside down. Her moral compass, who she is, what her family is like, the true nature of her relationship with her mom, all of it is like the veil is pulled off and she just starts to see the mess, and it's freaking hard for her too because that's her entire life. The main critique I have of this book is actually how it was advertised as funny. And I actually pulled up like a little poll on my Bookstagram as I was reading this, asking people if it was funny, and some of them said sometimes, and surprisingly a lot of people privately shared, I didn't find this funny at all. But when I looked at interviews and stuff from like the morning show or the Today Show or like whatever else, they just kept saying it was hilarious and super funny and laugh out loud funny, and they couldn't stop laughing. And I was just like, where? Like, where was this funny? I did question, did Jennette mean for this to be funny? Or did we like mess up and accidentally think it was funny? And so she just kind of went on with it, because in those interviews, I didn't really see her agree or nod or thank them or say, yeah, I really try to make it funny. So I started deep diving into all these interviews to see like if I can get one clip, just one clip of her saying, I actually never meant for this to be funny, or I did mean for this to be funny. It would clarify things for me. And I actually did find an interview. It's called the Good For You podcast, and it was a really great interview. And also the Drew Barrymore show, I think it's called like that. They do mention that they think it's funny, and they just have such a different connection than any other interview. So if you really want an interview where she says something different, I definitely recommend those two. But in both of these interviews, both women tell her they just found it so funny, because both of these women have also gone through an awful time with their mothers and their family, and so they recognize the type of humor Jennette was using. And Jennette actually replied and said, thank you, I do think it's funny, I definitely wanted to make it funny. So that confirmed to me that Jennette did intend for this book to be funny. However, for me, it wasn't laugh out loud funny. It really wasn't. Don't get me wrong, I did understand the dark humor. I did read the sarcasm, but for me, I thought she was just trying to show us her innocence. There's some chapters, for example, in the very beginning of the book, where she's very young and she watches her parents fight as they normally do, and her mom goes for a knife, threatens the dad, and like little Jennette is saying like, go mom, win. And I guess some people laughed at that. For me, I thought she was just presenting her innocence. She was a young kid who didn't know any better. For us, if we saw someone holding a knife and stuff, that's very serious. But when you grow up in this environment, you think that's just normal. And I thought that's what she was trying to illustrate and present. So the church she grew up in was Mormon. She describes that the church teaches everybody that at a certain age, usually age 8, you start to hear the Holy Spirit, and you get that inner voice that's like your compass. And because Jennette was very open and said that she did have faith in God and she liked going to church, she was excited when she finally heard that voice, and she thought it was the Holy Spirit. This voice tells her to do kind of like a little ritual where she has to like spin 2 times and open the door 5 times. And you can tell right away, like, that's OCD. But Jennette is so excited that she finally has the Holy Spirit with her and her guide, and she feels comforted and accomplished because she had faith. And again, people laughed at those scenes, and for me, again, that wasn't funny. I just thought it was this young kid who had believed in these things and was so open and excited and felt safe. So for me, it was heartbreaking. It wasn't funny. I wasn't laughing out loud. Not that Jennette needs our pity. She does say in some interviews that people take life too seriously and need a joke now and then, that not everything is sad. But for me personally, I thought it was supposed to show her state of mind and the reality that she thought all of this was normal. Later on in the book, when she becomes a young adult and stuff, I do find her sarcasm pretty funny. Again, I wasn't laughing out loud funny, but it wasn't tragic to me either. That really is my main problem with the way the book was advertised. So again, not really with her writing. Maybe if people didn't say it was so funny, almost like this comedy special, maybe I would have found it more funny. Again, I think she does a phenomenal job of describing her state of being, the way she grew up in this environment. If you found it super hilarious, laugh out loud, again, your experience and the way you read it. For me, it was more beautiful and tragic and real than it was hilarious. Let me know in the comments if you've also read this book, and let me know if you also found it funny. We definitely can have different opinions out here. I'm sharing my own. I'm always open to hearing people and why they found it funny. To be honest, when I asked the people who said yes, I found it funny, why they found it funny, the majority did say that they laughed when she was little. So yeah, let me know your opinion or DM me. My Instagram is linked below in the description, and I'll see you soon. Keep reading.